Welcome back, everybody. Once again, thank you for joining us. This is Pursuit of Purpose. I'm Robby.
I'm Chuck.
And today, we're going to bring to you a little episode about the topic of depression. Chuck, what can you say about depression? It's a big word, isn't it?
It is a big word, and there's a little bit to unpack, and we'll go through some language so that we can do some differentiating and do some better understanding, because that's what we want for our audience, and we want people to come away with a momentum toward answers. And depression is very big because everybody experiences anxiety and depression on a daily basis. You can't really get away from it. The whole idea is to learn to embrace it and to learn to cope with it and to maybe even to let it work for you. We'll maybe talk about that today. So I want to start out by giving two definitions to depression. The first one is simple and cut and dry, and it's what we will often call clinical. So you're kind of born with it or you're not. Maybe there are folks who listen who have bipolar. Either they have it or it's in their world.
Maybe a predisposition.
A predisposition. It's organic. It's just in you, and you have to be responsible for that. It's like being born with diabetes or something. But the most common, which is what folks like us, because I don't have anything organic, I know you don't either, would be what we call circumstantial. Now it's the product of something.
Environmental, maybe.
Environmental, yes. And we've had guests on our show who have had setbacks in life, and they went through environmental or circumstantial situations, and they had to learn to cope with their depression that was a result of that. And it's not a punishment, it's just the way nature tends to work. And we'll use some analogies later to talk about depression. But there's a couple of things there. I will say this as a definition. In the circumstantial depression, it is a product of either being denied or deprived something that I ideally wanted. It's the despair from being denied or deprived. And I'll split those two words real quick. To be denied something is I want it, some other wants it, only one of us is going to get it. So it could be pursuing a victory in a sport. That's kind of an easy thing to see. And then it could get a little more complicated, such as maybe I want a certain outcome. We've had guests on here talk about extending health issues. Some ended better, some did not. So there's that that denial. I'm being denied what I ideally want. The other is deprivation. I had it, and now it's gone. And I'm not real sure how to reclaim it. But I think I should go reclaim it. And I know you're going to speak later about that vortex of obsession where we go round and round and round because we let ourselves convince ourselves that that is the prize to have when maybe it's not. But we'll talk about that as this particular episode moves on. But that's basically some defining words of depression that I want our folks to understand. And if you have some response to that, then I will also segue us with an analogy that I think the folks could appreciate.
Well, it sounds like one of those states of mind, the denial, it sounds like maybe that's based in a very limited way of thinking, as if there's a limited supply, limited resources, or scarcity,
yes.
rather.
Yes.
So it's kind of a fear that it's either there's not going to be enough for me or that somebody else is going to get it before me.
Certainly. And to kind of keep it on a bit of a retail level, not an uncommon tool by a lot of folks who advertise for things. And most of us out here have either worked in some sales situation or we've been subject to it. So we're going into, say, a holiday season, and the commercials are all about don't be denied, don't miss out. And I know most of us know we're getting played a bit, but it works, and it's not going to change our life. But we don't want the little depressing part, like I should have.
Isn't it crazy that marketers are capitalizing on the potential of depression?
Yes.
During the holiday season, like they're intentionally threatening you with a depressing possibility.
Yes.
In order to get you to purchase their products, as if their goods, their product, is the answer.
The answer
for depression.
It's the answer to your holiday happiness.
Isn't that fascinating?
It is.
Just a different perspective.
It is. So I know folks are listening, and I don't want it to upset you. It's what they do, so it's okay.
They're not dumb.
They're not dumb. However, just don't get played by much. So, and the good thing about, say, maybe being denied episodes being released, like on your favorite TV show, DVR everything. Just saying. So. But if you go to Pursuit of Purpose, there's a catalog, lots of shows.
So it sounds to me like the difference is that the denial type of depression is like we said, a place of lack or limited resource, and then the deprivation type of depression would be like someone kept it from you, like as if it was, or maybe like I had a vehicle and it got repossessed.
Yes.
I was deprived of the privilege of owning my vehicle because I didn't pay my bill.
Right, and
to take it to an extreme level, I had a child and my child died.
Yes.
And I have now been deprived of that future in my relationship with the child and my expectation of my own life.
Yes.
Because whatever reason that my child died. Correct.
So when folks come into the grief class that I feel very fortunate to be able to conduct, we can kind of work both of those, the most obvious of which being exactly what you just said. I had them in my life. We were all in the living years together, and now they're not here anymore in that same way. They're still an influence. They're still spiritually with me. We're just not in that same physical plane. So they're gone. Therefore, I'm being denied that immediate daily feed, if you will. Now, by the same token, I'm being deprived of that. Sorry, folks. But what am I being denied? It's the hope to come. I'm never going to go into a relationship without having some level of expectation. Right. That's what I'm being denied, because I haven't got that yet. So that's where they kind of both go hand in hand. And as a grief counselor, we have to kind of work both of those languages until folks come up with a better response. And a lot of it really boils down to their own personal health and ability to solve problems. We'll talk about that before the show's over today.
So just to recap the differences, a denial seems like based in a lack of quantity of a substance.
Yes.
Rather. And then deprived means that whatever the thing is that I'm depressed about losing is gone and it's not coming back.
Not in the
same form as it was.
Correct.
So one is very finite and the other one potentially is not.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. And they all open themselves up to some level of hope, which is the state of mind that we're going for. That's what counseling and coaching is all about, is to reclaim hope. As someone once said, you can go 40 days without food. That's been proven. You can go maybe about 3 days without water, but you can't go 2 seconds without hope.
So, we, as humans, we find ourselves in these strange patterns, these activities, and we don't often know it when it starts. So if someone was to say, like, work their way into a pattern of depression, whether it be deprived or denied, whichever form of depression they found themselves in, can you give some examples of steps for building habits to find hope?
Yes. So most certainly. So ideally, the best way to find hope comes down to, in my opinion, as a counselor and a coach, comes down to forming and reforming the habits that give me an opportunity to measure success. I go into an effort expecting to be able to see some kind of result. It may not be the most ideal result I want. I may want the grand prize, but if I can see that my skills are improving toward the prize, that too is a maturity. Okay. And a lot of folks who are say they're changing their body condition. They want to be in a better state of health, so they're going to willfully deprive themselves of what has been causing the result they don't want.
Right.
And they're going, so that's that discipline, and they're going to replace that discipline with a better habit, whether it's an eating habit or an exercising habit or some type of medical regime. Whatever it is going to get them to that better place. Therefore, they already have captured a measure of hope to say this is going to work. I don't know to what degree it's going to work, but it's going to be better than where I came from. And that is climbing out of that void or that deficit or that depression in the earth. When I often describe people about being in a depression, I say it's actually two words, but they sound very similar. A depression has a bottom, but depressing is on the way to the bottom. So when folks come in and they'll say, so Chuck, I think I'm in a depression. And I said, are you in a depression, or are you declining toward a depression? Because there is a little bit of a difference. I know they sound so similar, like what's the point? But the point is, you may not have to get all the way to that rock bottom. You may already be at bottom enough to say, whatever it is, I sense it, I'm in a rate of decline, and I'm ready to stop this momentum and start going the other way.
So you've given some really cool tips about a way to find some hope. Now, something that I would love to inspire people about is to notice those bad habits of thought when they begin. And I've heard you give an analogy about depression. I've heard you talk about it at times in some reference to some landscaping or yard work or something like that.
Sure.
And I'd love for you to give that to the folks right now, if you wouldn't mind.
I will. Thank you, Robby. So imagine, folks, that you have a yard or a lawn. And some of you, not everybody lives in a yard or a lawn, but you could be at the park. But you imagine you're walking across this lawn, and out of nowhere, you find yourself stepping in mud. Now, you don't know how deep the mud is, you don't know how big the mud hole is, but you know you're in it because it's all over your shoes, it's splashing, your feet are sliding a little bit. And so the first thing we do is we typically back up a bit and we assess the situation. Now, I'm trying to get to the other side of this mud hole because I want to go over there, but I don't quite know how to get there yet. So now let's take a moment to do some evaluating. How do we make mud? Well, mud comes from a mixture of water and earth in a void or in a depression in the earth. Well, in our analogy, the water is emotion and the earth is information. Anytime we process information, we are also adopting and adapting into our mind emotions. Emotions are like markers, if you will. This experience we're having right now, this is fun, it's challenging, we're feeling emotions about it. We will forever associate those emotions to this experience that we're having right this minute. So sometime later, when folks may ask us about producing our program, and they say, well, tell us about that. And we will associate these positive emotions like, oh, it's fun, it's exciting, it's all the other emotions associated. How will we know that? Because it has previous attachments to other things. Maybe we've given presentations and trainings. Maybe we've had conversations with cool friends. It's kind of the same thing. So because of those associations, emotions are attached, and then they flow on. So we are made to be in a constant state of movement toward. And whether it's gravity like a stream or whether it's locomotion like we're walking down the road. Well, unfortunately, the mud hole implies there is no movement. Now we're stuck, and we don't know quite how we got stuck nor how to get free. Well, we'll get to that in just a moment. So the first thing we typically do when we find this mud hole is we get some parameter. Okay, how big is it? What all is it affecting? Is it isolated to just a certain situation, like maybe a relationship or a work issue or a health issue, or is it more vast than that? Oftentimes, though, in our less than developed skills, the first thing we do is, all I know is I got to get this mud out of my yard. So we go get some lawn tool, if you will, whatever skill we think we have, and we start tearing up real estate to drain the water out of this hole.
So metaphorically speaking, you got your emotional shovel and your wheelbarrow, and you're now in the mud.
It's right, and we are expressing. And so a lot of times when our folks in our audience are with someone who is having maybe a much more emotional expression, it's coming out with all kind of passions and almost even kind of hurtful a little bit. And you question like, hey, what's all that yelling? What's all of those
seemingly angry,
and
excited.
that's right. We will get to anger before the show's over today, folks, because anger plays plays in, which I hope will segue to another show later. But that being said, it's coming out, and we said, hey, that's a bit much. Whoa, whoa, whoa. And he said, well, I'm just telling you what I think. I just telling you what I feel. That's the more destructive way of digging a trench, if you will. So once it's done, oh yeah, I got the emotions out, but boy, I think I caused more problems in my world than solutions. Now I have this nasty trench. Now I have caused this discord between me and a trusted person in my life. Now I got to fix that also. That's where we come in as coaches and counselors, teaching folks how to put in better drainage, better flow. If we can put in like a French drain in a yard. And in our part of the country, a lot of land here is flat. There's not a lot of hills. So you have to create gravity. And you do that through plumbing and various things like that. So now that we have it drained, okay, it's done. Now we start putting quality things back in. That's information. That's our reading. That's our listening. That's our podcasting. Those are things like that. Now we're trying to bring in quality data. And you and I do that a lot as coaches when we go on site. We're bringing this quality refilling of folks to say, yeah, I want that to rebuild me up to a workable platform rather than living in the void that we're going to find ourselves in naturally. And just for the analogy, what's the reason we have voids in our life? Well, let's go back to the landscape. Before your yard was your yard, what was it? Well, it was the woods. There were trees and what have you. And someone came in and leveled this to ground level. They got the stumps all the way to the ground, ground the stumps, brought in topsoil, built up roads, built up paths, started building structures. That's our lives to live in. Unfortunately, though, what could they not get out of there? The roots. We all have a history. A lot of our guests that have come on, and I hope you guys tune into some of those shows, because those guests have a past. They have a history. And most of the time, it's not even a fault of their own. They were just born into a situation. What creates these, as the roots decay, it represents itself as an ongoing issue that I have to deal with. So I want to say that's just life, but that's life. What we do as mature adults is we find these things that, as we say, work for us. That works for me. It works for me to have this moment of reintroduction of information or recreation. It doesn't matter. Whatever it is, it keeps the void from getting too deep, drains the emotions, and now we're back to a level of function. Now you can enjoy your yard again.
So what it sounds like to me is you got a stump hole in your emotional experience, and you didn't even know it was there.
Didn't even know it was there.
It just had maybe some topsoil and some grass growing over it, and when you stepped in it, you found where the stump rotted out.
That's it.
Right?
That's perfectly it.
All right.
And now I'm splashing that mud all over me and everybody around me. So I hope folks will be responsible with that and not be mad about being in the situation, because the first thing we typically do, I tell folks, the first thing you're going to typically do when you find yourself in this state of decline is you're likely going to be blaming and displacing. Those are all trying to be put onto somebody else. It's their fault, or it's its fault, or it's what have you. And the unfortunate side of that is we're missing the ideal target. One of the definitions folks often use, Rob, in defining depression is they'll call it anger turned inward. Anger at self. We're thinking, okay, why would I be angry at myself? The reason we're typically angry with ourselves is not because we're bad people. It's because we don't yet have solutions. Keyword there being yet.
Well, and then the most obvious thing is that you may not have created this stump hole, but you didn't know it was there and you weren't looking close enough, and then you stepped in it. So you blame yourself for being in the stump hole.
Yes, I didn't see it. I didn't know how did it become. I don't know anything about it. But I found myself in it.
And I'll tell you this, and those country people out there that are like me and been in the woods and driving four-wheel drives and doing this, that, and the other, you don't see too many people that wind up in a stump hole stuck that are happy with themselves when they're in that stump hole.
Yes. How did I?
Yes.
Why didn't I see this? Or I knew better. All of those things.
And all those emotions come out even directed towards the people trying to pull them out of the stump hole.
Yeah, yes. There's your blaming and displacing.
Yes.
And they're even blaming the vehicle sometimes.
That's it.
Yes. Yeah, well, I spent so much money on this 4-wheel drive, and it can't even, when actually it was me.
That's right.
So that's where we as coaches and counselors are, especially coaches, are in the pro-action business. Okay, well, if you found yourself in it, you're not going to stay there. You're not going to stay stuck all day. You will get that truck out of there. So after you start working it out, then you start learning, okay, how can I not allow myself to get back in this situation again? Because it's coming. One of the things we often teach in our programs is the progression of habits. So we start putting in quality habit, get depriving ourselves of the bad habits. Remember the diet, putting in the good habits until it becomes a tradition. Traditions are the result of a collection of habits, which are basically solutions to problems that have not yet happened again. I like traditions. We all have traditions. I do things traditionally every morning. Some are habits, but some are so traditional because I know it's a solution to a situation that will come up today, whatever that is. And whether it's packing my bag for tomorrow. So in case I get up and then there's an issue, maybe you have children still at home. Well, there's a distraction. Well, I'm so glad I packed that bag yesterday because traditionally speaking, I'm ready to go. I already have my things. And that's just a shallow example of the greater problem-solving skills, which is what we're going for.
That's right. That's right. So one thing, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like what you're saying is, if you find yourself in a mud hole, stop. That's the first thing, right?
Yes.
Stop. Stop wiggling. Stop spinning your tires. Stop and assess where you are and how you got there.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. That's the first thing. Then the next thing is then we'll figure out how it got there. Because there may have been an origin that had nothing to do with you any more than just you were unaware.
But wouldn't you think that, would you agree that how it got there is not even that important while you're in it?
Correct.
First priority is getting yourself out of it.
Yes.
So, okay. I just wanted to make sure I understood and that we both agreed.
So then will come the next step. Okay, then how do I begin to get out? And that's where first thing we have to do is express. We have to, whatever it's causing me to feel, there's no wrong in feelings. There isn't.
Right.
The only adjusting to feelings comes with better understanding. I can be so upset with someone at this stage in my life. 5 years from now, I can have that similar conversation. I may run into somebody and go, I remember a few years ago you brought this up, and man, how's that going? You go, man, I hadn't thought about that in years. You're like, so whatever was so important at the moment, whatever was knee-deep mud at the moment, is really not that problem anymore. Mm-hmm. And I may ask, well, how did you get it resolved? It never really resolves itself. What I learned is that I'm actually talking to a quality person who started putting in quality personal habits.
Yeah.
And some of those personal habits are going back and reframing. Is that really everything I really think it is? Or am I exaggerating it because of the environment of the moment?
They changed their perspective and brought themselves to a place where they could see the mud hole as small and unimportant.
Yes. Before it grew into this consuming thing that is now taking up so much of my life.
So I guess based on that analogy, then it could be that you stepped in the mud hole and fell face into it. And your face is right there next to the mud hole. So it looks huge.
Yes.
Because your perspective is right up against it.
Yes.
And if you were to stand up and pull your body and face out of the mud, you might realize that the mud hole was just about as big as your 2 feet.
Yes.
And all you had to do was go around it or step over it.
That easy.
So perspective is also very important. And that person in your story gained perspective and saw how small their mud hole really was in comparison to their life. So,
right.
You said that you wanted to discuss anger, and you also talked about the circular nature, like the hole being big around. Mm-hmm. You kind of talked about it being round. Mm-hmm. Talk about that a little more.
Well, so oftentimes I'll go to anger first. So now whether it's as big as 2 feet or a little bigger than that. Regardless, we find ourselves angry because we find ourselves in it. And it's kind of similar to one of those things, like I didn't see it until I stepped in it. And I think oftentimes that's the first anger in those situations. It's hard for people to get there right off the bat, but not long after, folks will start taking, this is as a counselor, folks will start taking responsibility to say, looking back, I could have seen that, but I let myself be so distracted by unimportant things, I didn't see something worth addressing until it kind of hurt me, until it got my shoes dirty, and now my perspective is off. So this is the reason you and I will bring people in office, close the door, put them in a little bit of a sanctuary and say, let's break this down. And what are we having them do? Stand up, rise above it, and then they're like, oh, well, it's really not what I thought it was, or at least not as big or not as impacting. You're like, correct. I see it. I see it for what it really is, and I see it for what it really isn't.
And one thing I hear, and it's kind of hidden between the lines in what you're saying, and it sounds like what you're saying is you're trying to help people not talk about what they should do or judge themselves.
Yes.
And that's part of where their anger comes from, because they instantly, when they step into that depression, they instantly begin to judge themselves. I shouldn't even feel this way. I shouldn't think this way. I shouldn't be here. I shouldn't have these, whatever it is. I shouldn't be in this experience. So they have all these thoughts of should. And what is should? Should is an instant judgment of saying that you're less than what you ought to be.
Yes.
And that's totally unfair. And what anyone dealing with depression of any form or whatever, wherever the origin of it is, the first thing you have to understand is that you're not less than anything for it. We all experience it. So don't, as we say, don't should on yourself. Don't judge yourself. Accept that what you're experiencing is real and not necessarily your fault. You just accept the experience and look at it as though it just is. And it doesn't make you a less than person to be in it.
Correct. I'm going to give 3 C words I think can address that. The first one, folks will come in and they will often give us an array of consequential situations, that this is what's going on. Here's my consequential arrays, and here's complaint. That's the first C, and then I just let them go. Just tell me all these things. And so just to give them a bit of reflection, I might say, well, what caused that? Well, what caused that? And now they're having to analyze a bit. So the duality in the analysis is I'm analyzing the problem, which we're going to get to. It might not be their problem, but is the problem they think is going to be their problem. But they're beginning to realize that problem has its own origins. It has its own associations. That doesn't have anything to do with me per se. But as and I'm just reflecting, so you're telling me this, so you're telling me this. And they keep using language such as, that's right. But not I'm right, not necessarily they're right, that it's external. Right. That's right. And I said, so how could this affect you? Or better question, how could that reflect on you? Tell me how that could reflect on your character, your belief system, your paradigm, your values. And all of a sudden they say, well, it doesn't really have anything to do with my values. Exactly. That is an external thing, not an internally. You're heroic.
That's right.
You have skills. And I'll ask them, how do I know that? I said, because you're here. You're here addressing it. You may not know the how to, but the desire to, or in our favorite word, the want to, is more powerful than that. I promise you. And slowly but surely, they start creating this remedy first inside themselves, and then eventually they have something to offer, such as influence, and that was the word one of our guests used the other day. They start influencing maybe possible solutions in others, but it's got to come from a source. The most ideal thing people want in a depression or an anxiety is relief. They want it to go away.
Yes.
And I say, well, what's the ideal way for that to happen? You could include a temporary relief. You can call it a vice or a bad habit, or you can look for remedy. When the remedy is here, so consequentially, what's happening? What caused that from the other side, not from your side of the consequences, from the other side? What caused that? What are all the contributors? Then we start looking at the could. So what could happen if? What if? That's one of our ideal questions at Pursuit of Purpose. Well, what if we were to make one adjustment? What if we rode that for a couple of weeks, and then you come back and you visit with Robby and I guarantee you there will be difference. It's impossible not to if you are consistent and persistent. Slowly but surely you'll find remedy. From remedy you'll get the relief you desire.
So something you alluded to, and I want to touch on this because it's an amazing thing that so oftentimes, I know I don't think about it when I'm in the moment, and I often don't hear anyone else think of it either, but it's factual. You talked about problems. Depression always relates to what we see as a problem, right? The depression or the hole is always a problem of some sort in our perspective. So there's a fascinating thing about problems. Problems are always the door to opportunity. Without problem, we will never have opportunity. The problem is the foundation for every possibility that ever arose. So if it were possible to see yourself and your circumstance and your depression for what it truly is, it's actually an opportunity. An opportunity to grow, to progress, to build, to invent, to create something that you don't see yet. So if I could possibly inspire you to think this way, that if you are depressed, take heart, because you've been given an opportunity to create. And that's not a bad thing at all. That means you are blessed in your moment, because you can now pursue a purpose, and that is to take that problem and create your solution.
That's perfect. And ideally, that's what we, I think, are created to be. We're created to be these incredible human problem solvers. The Creator created us to do that. Most of us have turned that into some type of profession. There is a product that comes from that. And that, you broke that down ideally to say a depression, if you will, a problem, even a bit of a chronic problem, is really just an opportunity to create, to own an opportunity and create from there. And that, to me, is the most honorable thing we can do.
Well, as we work towards a close, I want to make sure that everyone understands. I want to reiterate that nothing that I said or that we've said in any part of this was intended to belittle or be dismissive towards depression in any way. Depression can be a very serious struggle. Depression is something, as we stated before, that it is a real factor in the human experience. We all deal with it in one form or another. We're even marketed to in this way, especially heading into the Christmas season. So understand that nothing about this is intended to belittle or dismiss the feelings and experience of depression. The hope is to inspire you to aspire beyond the way you feel at the moment. So, is there anything else you'd like to add as we close?
I would, and just as a bit of responsible disclaimer, what we're offering here today is a contribution toward some of those solutions. If you do find yourself in a medical situation, don't let our conversation be the limit. There's no problem in consulting a physician or someone like that if that is another contribution toward your solution of depression. But this training of thought, I do believe, will be an ideal component of working yourself out of some of these depressing situations. So we're not against medical consultation. Please do that if necessary.
And absolutely, medical consultation, psychiatric care, counseling care, friends, whatever it takes. The bottom line is reach out to somebody. If you're depressed, you're not alone. We've all been there. All of us. There's not anyone that exists in this world today that has not dealt with depression in some form or fashion. So just know you're not alone, and reach out to someone. Don't struggle through it alone. It's okay to admit, hey man, I'm fighting depression, and talk to somebody. Don't judge yourself either. That's unfair. You don't deserve that. Don't should on yourself. Anything else, Chuck, as we close?
No, that's perfect. Please challenge that language. Challenge the should language, which I love that. And start that process of proaction. You will find result. I have no doubts.
Well, thank you guys for joining us for another episode of Pursuit of Purpose, and thank you for letting us become a part of the pursuit of your purpose.